The Duke posed as a servant to observe his bride, but what he heard changed everything. Welcome, dear readers, to a journey through time, where the fragrant halls of Regency England house not only balls and appearances, but also wounded hearts seeking redemption. This is a story about truths hidden under disguises, about trust that was broken and patiently rebuilt, about two souls who learned that true love is not born from perfection, but from painful honesty and conscious forgiveness. In this narrative, we will meet Lady Eleanor Ashford, a young woman of noble lineage but ruined fortune, who learned all too soon that the world of titles and promises can be cruel. And we will meet Duke William Hartwell, a widowed man who carries the weight of loss and the fear of opening his heart again. Between them stands a lie that will become the most unlikely foundation for something true. Before we begin, dear reader, where are you joining us from on this journey? What city or country holds you as these ancient words come to life again? Leave your answer in the comments. And if this story touches your heart, as I hope it will, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Every gesture of yours keeps these stories alive, stories that travel through time to teach us about ourselves. Now allow me to draw back the curtains of the past. Year 1817. Spring location, Ashford Hall, outskirts of Sussex, England. The envelope arrived on an April morning, when the mist still clung to the gardens of Ashford Hall like an unwanted mourning veil. Eleanor Ashford held the paper between her fingers. Expensive paper, a red wax seal with a crest she did not recognize, and felt the weight of invisible chains closing around her wrists. 22 years old, still young, her aunt said, but Eleanor felt ancient, aged on the inside where no one could see. She had been someone else 2.5 years ago. A young woman who believed in promises whispered at balls, in gazes that seemed sincere, in futures that unfolded like moonlit roads. Viscount Philip Carey had destroyed that Eleanor, with the precision of someone shattering fine china, without remorse because the object no longer had market value. Now sitting by her bedroom window, she read the formal words her father had written. Not a request, a statement. She would be the Duchess of Greystone by the end of May. Duke William Hartwell, a widower for 4 years, 35 years old, in need of an heir. A marriage of convenience. A fair transaction. The ancient lineage of the Ashfords for the solid fortune of the Hartwells. Eleanor folded the letter with slow, deliberate movements. Her fingers did not tremble. It was a small victory, but she claimed it. Outside, the world continued its rhythm. Birds sang, unaware of marriage contracts. Flowers bloomed, indifferent to fortunes lost at gaming tables. Her father had gambled away not only their inheritance, but her freedom. And Eleanor, ever practical beneath her melancholy, understood the cruel math. Catherine, her 17-year-old sister, needed a dowry. The lands needed rescuing. And she was the currency. She closed her eyes. She imagined the Duke from the rumors she had collected like shards of glass, a reserved, severe man, rarely seen in society since his wife died of a fever after childbirth. The child had not survived either. 3 days of life, they said, a tragedy that had turned a man into a shadow. 2 ghosts sealing a pact, Eleanor murmured to the empty room. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, hoarse as if it belonged to someone who had forgotten how to speak of hope. The rain began to fall outside, spattering the window panes with tears she would not shed. Eleanor was good at not crying. She had learned that lesson well. She stood up, smoothed the skirts of her simple blue muslin dress, and walked to the writing desk. There was a reply to be written. A formal acceptance. Elegant words about honor and duty. Nothing about the heart, because the heart, that treacherous organ, she had locked away long ago in a box of burned memories. She dipped the quill in the inkwell. The ink was as black as the night that awaited her. Your Grace, the Duke of Greystone. The words flowed because they were empty, and empty things always flow with ease. Eleanor wrote of gratitude and commitment, of hoping to be a suitable wife, of understanding her responsibilities. She did not mention love. No one expected her to. When she finished, she sealed the letter and left it on the desk for the butler to send. Then she approached the oval mirror on the wall. The woman staring back at her had amber-colored eyes with subtle circles of weariness beneath them. Dark brown hair was pulled back in a simple bun. A face of delicate lines, but an expression hardened by disillusionment. You will survive this too, she told her reflection. Whether it was a promise or a curse, she wasn't sure. Outside, the rain intensified, washing the April world with its cold waters. And Eleanor, standing in her room that smelled of dried lavender and old pages, prepared to become someone else again. A duchess, a marble statue in cold ballrooms. But that night, when the house slept and only the wind whistled through the corridors, She allowed herself a single weakness. She walked to the library, lit a candle, hand touched the keys of the harpsichord with fingers that still knew how to express what her voice could not. The music rose through the old walls of Ashford Hall, melancholy sweet, a farewell to the woman she might have been. William Hartwell, the 5th Duke of Greystone, was standing in his private study when Lady Eleanor's reply arrived. The room smelled of old leather and ink, of candle wax and oak wood polished by generations. It was his sanctuary, the only place where he could remove the stone mask he wore before the world. He read the letter once, twice. He searched between the lines for something beyond formal courtesy, but Eleanor Ashford had been well trained. Perfect words, as empty as seashells on the beach. He placed the paper on the desk and walked to the window. Greystone Manor stretched out before him, meticulously cared for gardens, the lake reflecting the grey April sky, the wings of the house like open arms to embrace or imprison, depending on one's perspective. 4 years. Margaret had been dead for 4 years, taking with her not only her own life but that of a child who never knew the world beyond 3 precarious days. Rose they had named her, though she was never christened. A rose that withered before it bloomed. William closed his eyes, but the pain remained. Not sharp as it had been, but constant, dull, like a scar that aches when it rains. And now this, the need for an heir. Pressure from the family council. The threat of his cousin George, an irresponsible man, a gambler, who would ruin in years what the Hartwells had built over generations, inheriting everything if William died without descendants. He needed to marry again. The logic was relentless. But how to trust? How to hand over his name, his fortune, his already mutilated heart, to a stranger who might see in him only a title and money? Margaret had loved him for who he was. They had met in their youth, grown up together, built something real. How could he replace that with a business transaction? A knock on the door interrupted his somber thoughts. "Enter," William said, composing his mask. Stevens, his trusted valet for 20 years, entered with the discreet posture of one who knows when to remain invisible and when to offer counsel. He was nearly 50, with greying hair and eyes that had seen too much to judge. "Has the letter been sent, Your Grace?" "It has," William replied. A heavy silence filled the space between them. Then, "Stevens, you know me well. Am I a reasonable man?" "You are one of the most reasonable I know, sir." "Then why does this decision feel so foolish to me?" Stevens allowed himself a small smile. "Because matters of the heart rarely obey reason, Your Grace." William let out a short, humourless laugh. "The heart. Mine is well guarded, Stevens. It will commit no more follies." "If you say so, sir." The Duke looked again at Eleanor's letter, formal, distant, suitable. "I need to know who she truly is. I cannot hand over Greystone, hand over any future, to someone who sees in me only an opportunity. You could get to know her properly before the wedding. Informal visits, with chaperones and social theatrics. Unless people wear masks on those occasions." William paused, an idea forming, absurd perhaps, but the only one that made sense. "I want to see her when she doesn't know she's being watched. I want to know how she treats those who can offer her nothing. Whether she has compassion or only calculation." Stevens frowned slightly. "You are suggesting I will go to Ashford Hall, not as a duke, as a servant." The words came out firm, decisive. "Can you arrange it?" "A letter of recommendation from some London agency. Forged documents." The valet was silent for a long moment, assessing. "I can, but does Your Grace understand the risks? If discovered, I will be humiliated." "Deservedly so." William met Stevens's eyes. "But I prefer humiliation to repeating the mistake of marrying without knowing the truth. Margaret deserves for me to protect what we built, and any woman who enters this house deserves honesty about who her husband truly will be. And if Lady Eleanor passes the test?" William did not answer immediately. Outside, the clouds parted briefly, allowing a ray of golden sunlight to touch the gardens. "Then perhaps," he said softly, "perhaps there is hope that something true can grow even in barren soil." Stevens nodded, understanding all that was left unsaid. "I will prepare everything. Do you have a preferred name for this?" "Disguise. Edward. Edward Miller. Simple. Forgettable. Nothing about Your Grace is forgettable, sir, but we will make it work." When Stevens left, William returned to the window. He watched the gardens where Margaret used to walk, where they dreamed of children running among the flowers. The east wing had remained closed since her death. He could not bear to enter the rooms that still smelled of her, of lavender and roses, of promises that had unraveled. In 2 days he would send a message postponing the official visit due to urgent matters on the estate. In 3, he would be at Ashford Hall as a footman. The charade would begin. "Forgive me, Margaret. he murmured to the ghost that inhabited those walls, "but I must protect what you left behind, and for that I must be certain." The sun disappeared behind the clouds again, and the world returned to grey. William Hartwell, the Duke who would be a servant, stood motionless, preparing to step down from his pedestal and walk where no man of his position had ever dared. Truth, he had decided, was worth any price, even that of his own dignity. The carriage that left Edward Miller, not William, not the Duke, just Edward, at the gates of Ashford Hall was common, discreet, nothing to draw attention. He disembarked with a small, worn leather suitcase, simple dark wool clothes, and a nervousness he hadn't felt since his youth. Ashford Hall rose before him, less imposing than Greystone Manor but still elegant, with honey-coloured stone and ivy climbing the walls. Windows like eyes watched his approach. Was one of them Eleanor's room? The butler who received him was an austere man, with a face that looked as if it had never smiled and a rigid posture. "Mr. Pemberton," he learned later. "Letter of recommendation," William said, handing over the forged documents Stevens had arranged. Pemberton examined them with microscopic attention, as if words could lie, but paper could not. Finally he nodded. "The lady requires an additional footman for the wedding. Have you worked in London?" "Yes, sir, in the House of Lord." William recited the fabricated story, the names of fictitious people, details Stevens had carefully woven. "Your quarters will be shared with other servants. Awake before dawn, meals in the kitchen, modest wages. Do you understand the rules?" "Perfectly, sir." And so William Hartwell, who in his 35 years had never served anyone but his own conscience, became Edward Miller, footman, invisible, part of the silent machinery that kept aristocratic houses running. The first few days were a brutal revelation, waking when it was still dark, his back aching from the thin mattress, his hands numb with cold, serving in silence, eyes downcast, existing without existing. William discovered that invisibility had a texture, rough, humiliating but strangely liberating, and he watched Eleanor. First impression, she was smaller than he had imagined, of average height but with graceful, restrained movements. Dark brown hair usually tied back simply, revealing a slender, vulnerable neck, amber eyes that seemed to contain silenced storms. She wore dresses without extravagance, light muslins, few adornments. She had no elaborate jewelry, William noticed. The family truly was in difficulty, but what impressed him most was not her appearance. It was her silence. Eleanor moved through the house like a gentle ghost, speaking little, smiling even less, polite to the servants but distant, as if she maintained invisible walls around her. She spent hours in the library. William, while serving tea or collecting trays, saw the books, philosophy, poetry, treatises on agriculture, not frivolous novels. The woman sought substance, and she played the harpsichord. Oh, how she played! It was on a rainy April afternoon that William, carrying firewood for the hearths, stopped in the hallway upon hearing music. Notes drifted down the stairs like a shower of petals. Melancholy, technical, but also deeply felt. He recognized the piece. A Mozart sonata, the one in a minor. He left the firewood on the floor and crept silently upstairs, peeking through the ajar door of the music room. Eleanor was seated at the harpsichord, her back straight, her fingers dancing over the keys. Her eyes were closed, her face finally relaxed, as if music was the only place she allowed her masks to fall. William felt something tighten in his chest. Recognition, perhaps. She wore armor, too. She also hid who she really was, under layers of necessity and decorum. The music ended. Eleanor remained motionless for a long moment, her hands resting on the silent keys. Then she sighed, a sound so heavy with weariness that William wanted to enter, to reveal himself, to say that he understood. But he couldn't. Not yet. He descended the stairs in silence, retrieved the firewood and continued his charade. At night, in the shared quarters where other servants snored, William lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling. He thought of Margaret, who would have liked Eleanor. He thought of his own arrogance, how he had deemed this test necessary. But he also thought, she is alone as I am. And in the darkness of that strange room, wearing an identity that was not his own, William Hartwell began to question what truth he was really searching for. The moment arrived on a clear-skied afternoon, when spring had finally decided to bless Sussex with its generosity. Eleanor was to receive a visitor, Lady Anne Pembroke, a childhood friend, one of the few who had not abandoned her when the Ashford fortune collapsed. William was assigned to serve tea in the garden room. It was a simple task, Carry a silver tray, serve in silence, disappear. But it meant proximity, an opportunity to listen. Eleanor wore a pale green muslin dress that enhanced her amber eyes. Her hair was loose in soft curls, tied with a simple ribbon. She looked younger this way, less the statue she had become. Lady Anne was her opposite, blonde, vivacious, quick to laugh, but there was genuine affection between them, visible in the way Anne held Eleanor's hand, in the concern that showed in her blue eyes. "So it's true," Anne said as they sat down. "You are really going to marry him?" "I am." Eleanor's voice was calm, matter-of-fact. At the end of May. William, positioned nearby with the tray, kept his eyes down, but every nerve was alert. "But you don't even know him. You've never even seen him." "I know his reputation, his position. It is enough." "Enough? Eleanor, listen to yourself. You speak as if you're negotiating the purchase of a horse, not a marriage." Silence. William served the tea with hands that trembled imperceptibly. The dark liquid poured from the porcelain teapot, like secrets spilling out. Eleanor picked up her cup, studying its contents as if answers lay within. "That is exactly what it is, Anne. A transaction. He has the fortune and title my family needs. I have the ancient lineage. We are making a fair exchange. And love? And companionship? Love." Eleanor let out a short, joyless laugh. "You remember Philip, don't you?" William's body tensed at the name. Viscount Philip Carey, the man who had hurt her. That scoundrel is no example, but he is a lesson. Eleanor placed the cup on the small table with a controlled, precise movement. "I learned that love is a luxury for those who can afford illusions. I cannot. Catherine needs a dowry. The lands need to be saved, and I..." A pause. "I need to accept that some stories do not have romantic endings." William, pretending to adjust something on the tray, needed to hear more. With a calculated move, he knocked over the small milk jug. Not much, just enough to have an excuse to remain, to clean up, to be near. "Oh, forgive me, my ladies," he murmured, bending down with a linen cloth. They barely noticed him. To them, he was furniture. "And what about the Duke?" Anne pressed. "Aren't you curious about the man who will be your husband?" "I know what I need to know. A widower for 4 years, lost his wife and daughter in childbirth. Reclusive, serious, rarely seen in society." Eleanor looked out at the garden, where roses were beginning to bloom. "I only hope he is cordial, that he fulfills his duties and allows me to fulfill mine. I don't ask for affection. I only ask for respect, a civilized distance." The words struck William like stones. She saw him as incapable of feeling, as a walking contract. "You deserve more," Anne said softly. "I did in the past. Now I deserve security and protection for my sister. The rest." Eleanor shrugged, a gesture that tried to be casual, but radiated weariness. "The rest is a luxury I cannot afford." William finished cleaning the spilled milk. He stepped back into a corner, invisible again. But inside something was revolting. She expected nothing from him, nothing but a name and money. He wanted to feel validated. "See, she is self-interested." But he couldn't, because he didn't see greed in Eleanor's amber eyes. He saw resignation, an old sadness, the acceptance of a sacrifice, and something more, a dignity that was wounded, but not destroyed. "Promise me one thing," Anne said, taking both of Eleanor's hands. "If he is cruel, if he mistreats you in any way, you will tell me. I promise, but I don't expect cruelty. I expect polite indifference, and I can live with that." "But should you?" William thought furiously. "Should anyone live like that?" The two friends changed the subject, chatter about the neighborhood, about wedding preparations. William withdrew when he could, taking the tray back to the kitchen. That night, on his thin mattress, he couldn't sleep. Eleanor's words echoed. Civilized distance. "I don't expect affection. I expect nothing from him but a name and protection." He had come seeking the truth about her character. He was finding it, but he was also finding uncomfortable mirrors. His own reputation, cold, distant, incapable of affection after Margaret, had become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Eleanor didn't expect a heart from him, because the whole world said he didn't have one. And for the first time, William questioned who was really being tested here. The library at Ashford Hall smelled of old paper, candle wax, and that indefinable aroma of accumulated knowledge. It was a small room compared to the one at Greystone Manor, but cosy, with windows overlooking the gardens and a worn leather armchair by the fireplace. Eleanor spent hours there. William discovered her pattern. In the afternoon, after lunch, she would disappear among the shelves, only to reappear for dinner. It was on one of those days that the opportunity arose. William, assigned to clean the fireplaces, entered the library carrying a box of firewood. Eleanor was in the armchair, a thick volume in her lap, her profile illuminated by the soft afternoon light. He began his work in silence, cleaning ashes, rearranging logs, preparing a new fire. Mechanical movements he had learned in these weeks of deception. "Edward!" Her voice made him freeze. It was the first time she had called him by name, or at least by the name he was using. He stood up, turned around. "Yes, my lady?" Eleanor was observing him with a curious, slightly tilted expression. "Do you read?" The question was simple but laden with meaning. Servants who could read were rare. Education was a luxury. William chose his words carefully. "I had some schooling, my lady, before I entered service." "What kind of schooling?" "Enough to appreciate literature when I have the opportunity." Silence. Eleanor closed her book, revealing the title, The Complete Works of Lord Byron. "Do you like poetry?" "I do." The truth. William had always appreciated poetry, though Margaret used to tease him for it, saying dukes should only read political treatises. Eleanor stood up, moving to a bookshelf. She took out a thin volume with a brown leather cover. "Take this. I'll lend it to you, but take good care of it. It belonged to my mother." William took the book with hands he tried to keep steady. Hours of Idleness, Byron's first works. "My lady, I cannot. This is too valuable. That is why I am entrusting it to you." She looked at him directly, and William saw a sharp intelligence in those amber eyes. "You are no ordinary servant, Edward. Your diction is too refined. Your hands lack the calluses of someone who has worked in heavy service his whole life. Your posture—" A pause. "You were something else once. I won't ask what. We all have pasts we prefer not to reveal. But I recognize someone who has fallen in some way." William's heart beat fast. She saw too much. "My lady, read the Byron. Then if you wish we can discuss what you thought of it. It would be pleasant to have someone to discuss ideas with." A sadness crossed her face like the shadow of a cloud. "There is little substantive conversation in this house. I would be honored." And so it began. Fragmented conversations in the library, always when Eleanor was alone and William had an excuse to be there. They talked about poetry, about moral philosophy in the books she read, about events of the Napoleonic War that had finally ended. Eleanor opened up slowly, like a flower hesitant in the light. She expressed opinions on reform of the poor laws, on the education of working children, on injustices she saw but could not remedy. William, as Edward listened, argued gently, revealing knowledge a servant should not possess. She never pressed him about his past. She seemed to understand that they both inhabited spaces between worlds. She, an impoverished noblewoman forced into a transactional marriage. He, the disguised man seeking truths he perhaps shouldn't be looking for. It was in the herb garden, 3 weeks after his arrival, that something changed. Eleanor was gathering lavender and rosemary for arrangements in the drawing room. William was pruning nearby rose bushes, a task he had accepted because it offered proximity. "Edward," she said softly, "do you think people can change, fundamentally? Or do they just learn to hide who they are better?" The question caught him off guard. He considered it carefully. "I think people can learn new truths about themselves. If that is change, then yes." Eleanor held a sprig of lavender, running her fingers over the purple blossoms. "I was different, more confident, more hopeful in people. What happened? I learned that trust is a dangerous luxury." She looked at him, raw vulnerability in her eyes. "But sometimes it is lonely, to live always with one's guard up." William set down the pruning shears, approached her. The proper boundaries between a servant and a lady were clear, but something in that moment transcended social rules. "You can trust me, my lady. I have no pretenses or expectations. I cannot judge what I do not know of your life. But I can listen, if you need it." Tears shimmered in Eleanor's eyes, but they did not fall. She blinked, pushing them back. "Thank you, Edward. You are unexpected. In a world of cruel predictability, you are a kind surprise." He wanted to say, "You are too. You are so much more than I expected. So much more than the rumors suggested." But he couldn't. The lie between them was growing, becoming a monster that William fed daily, and he began to fear the inevitable moment when the truth would emerge and destroy this fragile, precious connection. That night in the servants' quarters, William held the volume of Byron that Eleanor had lent him. On the first page, in delicate script, "For my daughter Eleanor, who has always loved words." "Mother." He closed his eyes, clutching the book to his chest. What had begun as a test was turning into something dangerously real. The storm arrived on a May morning, turning the world grey and furious. Thunder shook the windows of Ashford Hall. Rain fell in curtains so dense it seemed like night, though it was midday. Eleanor was in her room, surrounded by old letters tied with a faded ribbon. Exactly 2.5 years ago today, Viscount Philip Carey had sent his last letter, the one that explained with an almost gentle coldness that he could not continue their courtship. Her financial difficulties he understood, of course. He hoped she would understand. He wished her future happiness. She read the words now, allowing herself to feel the old anger. Anger was safer than sadness. Anger had defined edges. "Coward," she whispered to the paper. "I didn't even have the courage to say it to my face." A particularly loud clap of thunder made the panes tremble. Eleanor stood up, walked to the window. Outside, through the torrential rain, she saw movement in the stable. Horses were neighing, frightened by the storm. Another flash of lightning. In the white glare, Eleanor saw a figure running between the house and the stable. Edward she recognized by his height, by the way he moved. She watched, curious in spite of herself. Edward entered the stable. Minutes later, the neighing subsided. He remained there, and Eleanor imagined him calming the animals, his gentle hands on nervous coats, his voice whispering reassurance, compassion. He had genuine compassion, not performative. Something stirred in Eleanor's chest. Admiration, perhaps. Gratitude for discovering that kindness still existed, even in unexpected places. When Edward finally returned to the house, soaked to the bone, Eleanor had made up her mind. She went down the stairs, found him in the servants' corridor. He was taking off his dripping coat, his hair stuck to his forehead, shivering slightly. "Edward," he turned, surprise on his face. "My lady, you shouldn't be here. This is the... I saw you helping the horses in the storm." "It is my duty, my lady." "No, it isn't. Your role is to serve inside the house. But you went out by choice, because you cared." Eleanor held out a linen towel she had brought. "Dry yourself. I don't want you to fall ill." Their fingers brushed briefly as she handed him the towel, an electric, improper, unsettling contact. William dried his face, his hair, his eyes never leaving hers. "My lady, you made me think," Eleanor said abruptly, "about kindness, about how I judge the entire world by the actions of one cowardly man." She crossed her arms, protecting herself, but continued. "Philip, Viscount Carey, made promises. When my family's finances collapsed, he disappeared. A formal letter, empty apologies, goodbye. Since then, I assumed all men were like that. Calculating, transactional." "Not all," William said softly. The words were a betrayal of his disguise, but he couldn't stop them. "No, not all." Eleanor smiled sadly. "You proved that. A humble servant showing more character than a viscount. But I am not a servant," William's conscience screamed. "And this lie is worse than Philip's, because you are beginning to trust me, and I am betraying that trust with every moment." The storm raged on outside, thunder punctuating the silence between them. "May I tell you something?" William asked, his voice hoarse. "Something true?" "Please." He took a deep breath. "I was married. She died in childbirth. The child, too. The truth. Finally, the truth. Margaret was... she was light. Pure goodness. When I lost her, I also lost faith that the world made sense. I closed myself off. I built walls so high no one could climb them." Tears now glistened in Eleanor's eyes. "So, Edward, we live in different worlds, my lady. But pain. Pain is universal. You lost trust. I lost hope. We both became lesser versions of who we were." Eleanor took a bold, unthinking step forward. She took his hand, a gesture that violated all rules of propriety. "Margaret would be proud. Of the man you still are, even in your pain." William looked down at the small hand holding his, so pale against his skin. He wanted to confess everything. "I am not Edward, I am William, I am the Duke you are to marry. This whole charade was to test you, but now I feel like the worst kind of imposter." But the words stuck in his throat. "And what about you?" he asked. "You will marry soon, a man you do not know. Are you afraid?" Eleanor released his hand, hugging herself. "Terrified, especially of fulfilling my marital duties. My mother lost twins between myself and Catherine. She bled for days. Almost died. I always thought that could happen to me." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And now I'm told I must produce heirs. As if it was simple. As if the fear doesn't paralyze me." William's heart shattered. He had never considered this. That she was mortally afraid of the very function he expected from her. "The Duke," he began, choosing his words with desperate care. "Perhaps he is a reasonable man. Perhaps he will understand your fears. Perhaps he sees only duty, the need for an heir." "My function," Eleanor faced him. "Do you see why I stopped expecting kindness from noblemen? They see us as chess pieces, moved for their own convenience." "No," William wanted to shout. "Not all of us. Not me. Not when I've seen who you truly are." But he only said, "I hope he surprises you, my lady. That he is better than you expect. I hope so too, she smiled faintly. But low expectations are rarely disappointed. Thunder rumbled again, more distant now. The storm was passing, leaving the world washed, renewed. But something had changed between them. An intimacy that should not exist. Shared truths that created forbidden bonds. Eleanor retreated, went up the stairs back to her room and her old letters. William remained in the corridor, soaked and shivering, but not from the cold. From guilt. From a terrible desire to deserve the trust she was beginning to place in him. And from fear of what would happen when she discovered the truth. The message arrived at dawn. A messenger in Greystone Manor livery. An envelope sealed with red wax and a ducal crest. The Duke would arrive in 2 days for a formal visit before the wedding. Eleanor read the announcement with a neutral expression, but William, watching from his post near the door, saw her fingers tremble imperceptibly as she held the paper. 2 days. He had 2 days before the charade crumbled. That night, after the house slept, William wrote a letter. Black ink on white paper, words that cost him like blood. Lady Eleanor, I must meet with you before the Duke arrives. Please come to the library at dawn alone. There is a truth I can no longer hide. Edward. He left the letter on her writing desk where she would find it upon waking. Then he returned to his room where he did not sleep, only watched the darkness and prepared words that would never be adequate. The dawn tinted the world in rose and gold. Eleanor entered the library with her robe over her nightgown, her hair loose down her back, her bare feet silent on the Persian rug. She looked ethereal, almost unreal in the soft light. William was standing by the window, already dressed, but not in servant's clothes. He wore gentleman's attire, a perfectly cut dark coat, a silk waistcoat, trousers that cost more than a footman's entire year's salary. Eleanor stopped at the entrance, confusion crossing her face. Edward? Why are you? He turned, and now he allowed her to see it. The posture that had never truly been a servant's, the authority that had always existed but was disguised, the weight of a title he carried like a second skin. He removed the ring he had hidden on a chain around his neck, heavy gold, a signet with the Hartwell crest, a lion rampant on a blue field. I am not Edward Miller, he said, his voice steady despite the storm within. I am William Hartwell, 5th Duke of Greystone, and I've been lying to you since the first day. The silence that followed had a texture, thick, suffocating, heavy with betrayal. Eleanor turned as pale as linen. Then a red flush crept up her neck, her cheeks, covering her in the blush of fury and humiliation. You are him? Her voice trembled. The Duke? My fiancé? Yes. Why? The word came out like a choked cry. Why would you do this? Why would you infiltrate my home as a servant? William took a step forward. She retreated. To know your true character. To know if you were a woman with a genuine heart or a social climber interested only in a title and fortune. A test? Eleanor laughed now. A hysterical, humorless sound. You tested me? As if I were a horse at auction. As if you had the right to invade my privacy, my trust. Eleanor, Lady Eleanor, you have not earned the right to informality. Tears were streaming now, uncontrollable. I trusted you. I told you things I tell no one. About Philip, about my fears, about... I know. And I am sorry deeply. Sorry doesn't undo the betrayal. She crossed her arms, trembling. Do you know what's worse? You compared yourself to Philip, said you were different. But you're not. He manipulated me for financial gain. You manipulated me for what? Paranoia? Control? The accusation cut deep because it carried truth. I was afraid, William admitted. Afraid of marrying again someone who would see in me only an opportunity. Margaret loved me for me. How could I trust again? Trust? You speak of trust. Eleanor laughed bitterly. At least Philip was honest about his greed. You disguised yours as prudence. You wore a servant's clothes and stole my secrets. That is worse. Much worse. William had no defense. She was right in every word. What did you discover? Eleanor continued, her voice breaking. In your little experiment? Did I pass the test? Was I kind enough to the servants? Pious enough? I discovered, he said quietly, a woman of extraordinary depth, of quiet courage, fervor dignity wounded but never destroyed. I discovered someone who I would like to know truly. Not as a duke and an obligation, but as people. But you've destroyed that possibility, haven't you? Eleanor wiped her tears with the back of her hand. Any chance of something genuine between us died with this revelation. A long silence. William wanted to argue, but he couldn't. She was right. Will the wedding still happen? He finally asked. Eleanor closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were hard, distant. It will. Catherine needs a dowry. My family needs rescuing. I will fulfill my part of the bargain. Eleanor, But know this, your grace. The final words were spat like venom. You have destroyed any possibility of trust. We will be Duke and Duchess in public. We will fulfill our duties, but in private, we will be strangers. That is the arrangement you negotiated with your charade. She turned to leave. William called out, "Wait, please." Eleanor stopped but did not turn back. "Margaret would have hated what I did," William said, his voice broken. "She taught me that love is trust, and trust cannot be tested, only given. I betrayed everything she taught me. I betrayed you. And I am sorry beyond what words can express. Sorry does not fix what is broken." Eleanor glanced over her shoulder, her amber eyes swimming in tears. "I wished you were different, that you would prove that good men still existed. And for a moment, as Edward, you were, but it was all a lie. Even the kindness was a disguise. No, not that. Everything I felt, everything I shared about Margaret, about my pain, it was real. How can I know? How can I believe anything that comes out of your mouth now?" There was no answer to that. Eleanor left the library, leaving William alone with the ashes of his regret. The sun rose completely, bathing the world in golden light. But for William Hartwell, everything remained dark. The next 2 days were a carefully choreographed performance. The Duke of Greystone arrived officially at Ashford Hall, an elegant carriage, impeccable livery, and imposing presence. Eleanor received him in the main hall, dressed in sky-blue silk, her hair in an elaborate style, her face a perfect mask of aristocratic courtesy. "Lady Eleanor," William said, bowing over her hand. Her skin was as cold as ice. "Your Grace, it is an honor to finally meet you." The words were correct, lifeless. Only the two of them knew the bitterness they concealed. To the Ashford family, a distracted father, a stern aunt, Catherine watching with youthful curiosity, it seemed like a first meeting between well-mannered strangers. No one suspected the weeks of deception, the truth shared under a false identity, the betrayal that now pulsed between them like an open wound. The following days were an endless dance, strolls in the gardens, always with Catherine as a proper chaperone, discussions about wedding preparations, a ceremony in the Ashford chapel, a modest reception given their limited finances, a formal dinner with the neighbours, where William and Eleanor played the part of a suitable couple. He attentive without being overbearing, she grateful without being effusive, a cold perfection. But when they were alone, stolen moments in an empty library, an isolated corridor, the ice did not melt. Eleanor barely met his gaze. She answered questions with monosyllables. She maintained a physical distance as if he were a contagious disease. William tried multiple times to start a genuine conversation. "Eleanor, can we talk about the wedding?" "Certainly. The ceremony will be at 10 in the morning. I expect you to be punctual. Not about logistics. About us. There is no us, Your Grace. There is you and there is me fulfilling a contract." Each rejection cut deeper. William began to understand. He had expected easy forgiveness. He had expected her to see his vulnerability, his original intentions, and absolve his betrayal. But Eleanor was not a character in a novel. She was a real woman, hurt by a second man who had manipulated her emotions. Forgiveness, if it came, would be hard-won, and perhaps it would never come. The night before the wedding, William lay awake in a guest room at Ashford Hall. Tomorrow he would marry a woman who justifiably despised him. He would build a life with someone who saw in him only a traitor. "It's what you deserve," his conscience whispered. But a part of him, the part that had truly known Eleanor, that had seen her strength and her vulnerability, wept for the lost opportunity. It could have been different if he had trusted from the beginning, if he had been honest. But he had chosen fear over courage, tests over faith, and now he would pay the price. 4 days before the wedding, when the house slept and only the moon bore witness, William found Eleanor in the library. She was standing by the window, wearing a simple robe, her hair loose. She looked ethereal, distant, almost a ghost. "You shouldn't be here," she said without turning. "I know, but I need to give you something. Before it's too late." She turned, her expression guarded. "What?" William held out his hand. In his palm was a silver key wrought with delicate details. "This is the key to the private study at Greystone Manor, and to the East Wing." Eleanor frowned. "Why would you give me this?" "The East Wing has been closed since Margaret's death. I couldn't bring myself to enter the rooms that still smelled of her. But I want you to have access." He took a deep breath. "No locked doors between us. No more secrets. This key represents a promise. Absolute honesty from now on." Eleanor took the key slowly, studying it in the silvery moonlight. "Honesty? Now? I know I don't deserve your trust, but I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn it." A long silence. Eleanor closed her fingers around the key. "Why did you remain a widower for so long?" she asked abruptly. The question caught him off guard, but he answered honestly. "At first, because the pain was an open wound. It was still bleeding. Later, because I found no one who made me desire more than solitude. Solitude was safe, predictable. And now I fear I have destroyed the only chance I had, knowing you first as Edward, then as I truly am. It showed me that isolation is not safety. It is a prison." His voice broke. "And now the cell is locked from the inside." Eleanor looked at the key in her hand. "I still feel the wound of your betrayal. You hurt me, William, deeply." The first time she had used his name. A small step, but a significant one. "I recognize that holding a grudge is a heavy burden," she continued. "And I am tired. Tired of living with my guard always up, always expecting the next betrayal." Her amber eyes met his. "But I need time. To forgive. To trust again. Can you give me that? Time? Patience? All the time you need. And infinite patience. And honesty. Absolute even when it hurts. I promise solemnly." Eleanor nodded slowly. "Then perhaps we can build something. Not on the original lie, but on the truth that comes after." Her voice softened minimally. "Cracked foundations can be repaired, if they are filled with strong mortar." "The mortar of honesty," William said. "And time. And actions that match your words." They stood in silence, two strangers who knew too much about each other, trying to find a bridge over the abyss created by deceit. "Margaret would have liked you," William said softly. "I don't know if that's a comfort or a sorrow. Both, perhaps. But it is true. She had the strength that you have. A kindness that did not bend." Eleanor put the key in her robe pocket. "I will keep this as a reminder of the promise you made, and I will be held to it daily. I expect you to be." She turned to leave. At the door she stopped. "William? Yes? Thank you. For the key, for the attempt." "It is not an attempt. It is a commitment." Eleanor smiled, a small, sad but real smile. Then she disappeared into the dark corridor. William remained in the library, feeling for the first time since the revelation something other than despair. Hope, as fragile as a candle flame in a storm, but alive. The 26th of May, 1817, dawned glorious. A clear blue sky, golden sun, a breeze carrying the scent of roses and lilacs, as if nature itself had conspired to create the perfect scene. The chapel at Ashford Hall was small but beautiful, old stone covered in ivy, stained glass windows casting rainbows of light upon the altar. Polished oak pews held the few guests, family, close neighbors, loyal friends. Eleanor waited in an adjacent antechamber, dressed in ivory silk with Brussels lace that had belonged to her grandmother. The dress was simple but elegant, without excess. Like her, Catherine was adjusting her veil, tears in her eyes. "You look beautiful." "I'm nervous," Eleanor admitted. "That's normal. Every bride is." But Eleanor was not nervous like a traditional bride. Her fear was not of the marriage itself, but of the unknown that came after. Forced intimacy, marital duties, a life shared with a man she still didn't fully understand. "Will he be good to you?" Catherine asked quietly. "The Duke?" Eleanor thought. "I don't know. But I believe he will try. Is that enough?" "It will have to be." The music began, a harpsichord playing a Baroque prelude. The moment had arrived. Eleanor walked down the chapel aisle on her father's arm, who looked both ashamed and relieved. Each step took her toward an uncertain future, toward a life she had not chosen but had accepted. William waited at the altar, tall and imposing in dark formal attire. When he saw her, something passed across his face. Admiration, regret, hope, all mixed together. Their eyes met. Eleanor saw in his what words had not said. "I'm sorry." "Thank you. I promise." She gave an imperceptible nod. "I am here. I am trying. Prove it to me." The priest began the ceremony. Ancient words about holy union, about love and honor till death do them part. Ironic, considering the circumstances. When it came time for the vows, William spoke with an intensity that surprised everyone present. "I, William, take you, Eleanor, to be my wife, to have and to hold, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, all the days of my life." Love. The word hung in the air, bold, vulnerable. Eleanor responded in a firm voice. "I, Eleanor, take you, William, to be my husband, to have and to hold, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to cherish and to honor, all the days of my life." She did not say love. She couldn't yet. But she said honor, and for now it was enough. Rings were exchanged, gold against pale skin, symbols of commitment, of promises they would have to keep. "You may kiss the bride." William leaned in, and Eleanor allowed the kiss, brief, respectful, without passion, but also without coldness. A beginning. They left the chapel as the Duke and Duchess of Greystone, the sun bathing them in golden light. Guests threw rose petals. Catherine wept openly. Lady Anne smiled, hopeful. The reception was modest but cheerful. A simple cake, suitable wine, traditional dances. William and Eleanor danced the opening waltz, their bodies properly close, their gazes cautious. "You look beautiful," he said. "You are punctual." A small tease. The first since the revelation. William smiled genuinely. "I promised I would be. The first of many promises you'll have to keep. I am aware." The music continued and they spun, two people trying to find a common rhythm. When the party ended and they climbed into the carriage for Greystone Manor, Eleanor felt the weight of the change. She was no longer a miss. She was a duchess. She was no longer an inhabitant of Ashford Hall. She was the lady of an estate she had never seen. William sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "The journey takes about 3 hours." "Very well." Silence for some time. Then, "I read all the Byron poems you lent me." Eleanor looked at him surprised. "You did?" "As Edward," I began. "As William," I finished. "There was a line that touched me. 'She walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies,'" Eleanor completed, almost smiling. "So you found romanticism useful after all." "I discovered it contains truths that philosophy ignores." They looked at each other, and something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps. Both wounded, both trying. "I still carry the hurt," Eleanor said honestly. "But I also recognize that we were both hurt before. Perhaps we can heal together." William took her hand, a silent question. Eleanor allowed it, their fingers intertwining. "Together," he agreed. The carriage continued down the road, carrying a Duke and Duchess toward a future that was uncertain, but not hopeless. For the first time, Eleanor allowed herself to think, perhaps, just perhaps. Greystone Manor was magnificent. 3 stories of limestone, extensive gardens, a serene lake reflecting the sky, much larger than Ashford Hall, almost intimidating in its grandeur. Eleanor stepped down from the carriage and looked at what was now her home. She felt small, out of place. William, sensing this, offered his arm. "I will show you everything, gradually. There is no rush." The first few days were an adjustment. Eleanor explored the mansion, met the servants who treated her with cautious respect, and familiarized herself with the routines. The East Wing remained closed, except for Margaret's room, which William had kept untouched as a memorial. Eleanor saw through the ajar door. Delicate furniture, lace curtains, the ghostly scent of lavender. "You can go in if you wish," William said. "Not yet. That space is yours." "I will respect that." But in the following weeks something changed. William began to keep his promises. He shared the management of the estates, inviting Eleanor to meetings with the stewards, asking for her opinions on improvements in the villages, on the education of the tenants' children, not as a courtesy, but because he genuinely valued her perspective. Eleanor, cautious at first, began to open up. She suggested changes, discussed philosophies of land management, and revealed an intelligence that society did not typically allow women to display. "You should have been educated to manage estates," William said after one particularly productive meeting. "You have a natural talent for it." "Women are educated for nothing but decorating drawing rooms and producing heirs," Eleanor replied, an old bitterness in her voice. "Then we will change that, here at least." And they did. Slowly, the Greystone estate became a genuine partnership. In the evenings they dined together, not in formal silence but with conversations that gradually deepened. Literature, philosophy, political events. William discovered Eleanor's intellectual depth. She discovered he was not the cold man the rumors painted. Their marital duties were approached with extreme care. William, remembering her fears, never pressed. When it finally happened, it was with gentleness, patience, and constant communication. "I'm nervous," Eleanor admitted on their first truly intimate night. "We can stop at any time." "You are in control." His tenderness surprised her. She had expected a cold, mechanical duty. The reality was human warmth, genuine consideration. Afterward, lying side by side in the darkness, Eleanor said, "Thank you for being that kind. It is not kindness, it is love. Still small, still growing, but real." Eleanor didn't reply, but she took his hand. It was answer enough. 4 months after the wedding, September was gilding the gardens of Greystone. Eleanor used the silver key for the first time. She entered William's private study while he worked by candlelight. He looked up, surprised, hopeful. "Eleanor, I have been reflecting," she said, approaching him, "about foundations. Ours began with a lie, but they have been built with painful truth since." She sat on the edge of his desk, looking at him. "Lies are like cracks in a foundation. If they are filled with honesty, they can make the structure stronger. William stood, approaching her carefully. Have you forgiven me? I am forgiving you. It is a process. Some days are easier than others, but yes, I am. Eleanor! She took his face between her hands and kissed him. Not out of duty, not out of obligation, but by choice. Out of desire. Out of something that was beginning to feel like love. When they parted, they both had tears in their eyes. I will spend every day proving I am worthy of this second chance, William promised. And I will hold you to that promise, William. Every single day, he smiled. Edward, she blinked, confused. What? Sometimes in private you can call me Edward. To remember that the best part of me is the one you met when I was just a man. Without a title. Without pretenses. Eleanor smiled, a genuine, radiant smile. Edward, then. They kissed again, and this time there was a future in the kiss. A promise. Hope. Outside, the moon rose over Greystone Manor, bathing the gardens in silver. And in the east wing, Eleanor had finally opened the curtains, allowing light to enter the closed-off rooms. Margaret still had her memorial, but the rest of the wing was now alive again. Like them, October arrived with gentle rains that made the Greystone gardens shine in deep shades of green. Eleanor, now 3 months into her marriage, had found a rhythm in her life as a duchess. It was not what she had imagined. It was both better and more difficult. Better because William proved himself daily. Small gestures of consideration, wildflowers left on her desk, new books he knew she would like, shared decisions about the estate. More difficult because true intimacy was frightening. It was easier to keep up walls, but walls kept out pain and joy alike. That afternoon, Eleanor was walking in the gardens when she found William talking with Stevens near the stables. Both men bowed as she approached. Stevens, Eleanor greeted warmly. She had discovered that the loyal valet had orchestrated the entire original charade, but she couldn't bring herself to blame him. His loyalty to William was admirable. Your Grace? Stevens replied, a discreet smile on his lips. May I say it is a pleasure to see you flourishing here? Eleanor blushed slightly. Flourishing may be an exaggeration. I disagree, William said, offering his arm. Stevens, if you'll excuse us. They walked together along the gravel paths, autumn leaves crunching under their feet. The air smelled of damp earth and ripe apples in the nearby orchard. Catherine wrote to me, Eleanor said. She is well, eager to visit us at Christmas. It will be wonderful to have her here. William paused. And what about you? Are you well? Eleanor considered. Honesty was the foundation they were building, so some days, yes. Others, I still feel the shadows. A fear of trusting completely. A fear that this is temporary, that I will disappoint you again. Yes. William stopped, turning to face her. I promise I will work every day to earn your trust. But Eleanor, I need you to understand I am human. I will make mistakes. Not of the magnitude of the first, I hope, but mistakes will inevitably come. I know. What we need is a commitment to honesty even when it hurts, to communication even when it is difficult. Can we do that? Eleanor looked into his eyes, grey like storm clouds but now tempered with tenderness. We can. We are. He pulled her into a hug and she let herself melt into his warmth. Safety. She had found unexpected safety in this man who had started as a deception. Anne is coming for tea tomorrow, Eleanor said against his chest. Your friend, the one you were talking to in the garden when I was... Edward, yes. Eleanor pulled back slightly, looking at him. Should I tell her the truth about how we met? William considered it. It is your decision. I have no secrets from you. I think I will. She deserves to know. And I need to talk about it, to process it, then tell her. And if she justifiably hates me, I will accept it. Eleanor smiled. She won't hate you. She's too curious for that. They were right. Lady Anne, upon hearing the full story the next day, went through a range of expressions. Shock, indignation, fascination, and finally, laughter. My heavens, she said, holding her teacup with both hands. This is worthy of a novel. It is worthy of a scandal, Eleanor corrected. That too. But, Eleanor, Anne grew serious, is he being good to you? Truly? He is. Better than I expected. Better than I thought possible. Then perhaps the deception, though terrible, served a greater purpose. You met each other without pretenses, without social performances. Eleanor considered this. I never thought of it that way. But perhaps you're right. That evening at dinner, Eleanor mentioned Anne's perspective. She believes the deception, while wrong, allowed for something authentic. William set his fork down. What do you believe? I believe it was wrong. But I also believe we found truth in the midst of the lie. And that is worth something. It is worth everything, William said intensely. You are worth everything. Eleanor felt a warmth rise in her cheeks. She was still not used to such declarations, but she was learning to accept them. Later, in her private chambers, she kept her own room, as was customary, but William often visited her or vice versa. Eleanor wrote in her journal, October 1817, I married expecting a prison. I have found a partnership. I married expecting coldness. I have found a growing warmth. The scars still ache, especially on rainy days when melancholy visits me. But William is patient, and I am learning that forgiveness is not a single event. It is a daily practice. Margaret will always be a part of him. I do not envy that. I admire it. A man who loves so deeply, even in loss, is a man capable of great feeling. And I am beginning to hope again, not as I did before with youthful naivety, but with a wisdom born of pain. A cautious hope, but hope nonetheless. She closed her journal as a knock sounded at the door. William entered, a shy expression on his face. May I stay? You may. He lay down beside her, and they talked in the darkness about nothing and everything, plans for renovations in the village, a book they were both reading, speculations about the future. Would you like children? William asked softly. Eleanor tensed. The old fear. I would, but I'm afraid too, he admitted. Afraid of losing you as I lost Margaret. But Eleanor, I will listen to all your fears. We will consult the best physicians. We will not rush anything, and if you decide it is too great a risk, I will accept it. Tears filled her eyes. You would do that? Give up on having heirs? For you? Without hesitation. Eleanor turned in his arms, hiding her face in his shoulder. I want to try. When I'm ready, not yet, but one day. When you're ready, in your time. They fell asleep like that, intertwined, two people slowly rebuilding themselves. Outside, the October night was cold but clear. Stars shone over Greystone Manor, and within its walls love was growing where once there had only been duty. November brought the first great test to their marriage. It arrived in the form of George Hartwell, the distant and irresponsible cousin, who stood to inherit everything if William died without heirs. George appeared without warning, in an extravagant carriage, wearing expensive but shabby clothes, with the air of a man accustomed to spending more than he possessed. William! George exclaimed, storming into the drawing-room, as if it were his own home. And this must be the Duchess, charming, absolutely charming. Eleanor felt an instinctive dislike. There was something slick about the way George looked at her, as if appraising a valuable object. William was tense. George, this is an unexpected visit. Family doesn't need warnings, cousin. I came to meet your new wife, to ensure she is generating heirs properly. The lack of decorum was shocking. Eleanor blushed but maintained her composure. Our private life is not your concern, William said coldly. Ah, but it is. If you produce no heir, all of this will be mine. George gestured broadly. Greystone, the estates, the fortune. I have a direct interest. You will have nothing as long as I live. Exactly. As long as you live. George's smile was unpleasant. Accidents happen, cousin. A tense silence. Eleanor felt William stiffen beside her. Are you threatening me? Don't be dramatic. Merely observing realities. George helped himself to brandy without being invited. But I came for another reason as well, curiosity. I've heard some interesting rumors. What rumors? William asked, his voice dangerously low. About a footman who worked briefly here at Ashford Hall, Edward Miller, I believe, disappeared mysteriously just as the Duke began his courtship of Lady Eleanor. George watched them both closely. Curious, isn't it? Eleanor's heart went cold. Someone. Rumors are just that, she said, her voice firm. Gossip from bored servants, perhaps. But I also heard that this Edward Miller had manners far too refined for a footman. Perfect diction, hands without calluses. George smirked. As if he weren't a real servant at all. William took a step forward. What do you want, George? Merely to ensure there are no widow's irregularities. A scandal could destroy the family's reputation. And if the Duchess knew she had been deceived, manipulated... George paused dramatically. Well, that could annul the marriage, couldn't it? Coercion through fraud. Eleanor felt anger boil inside her. This man was trying to destroy what she and William had so carefully built. There is no fraud, she said clearly. I married with full knowledge and consent. And if you imply otherwise, we will sue you for slander. George blinked, surprised by her aggression. William moved closer to his cousin, intimidating in his height and authority. Get out of my house now. But William, now. And if you spread rumors, lies, anything that harms my wife or my marriage, I will use every resource at my disposal to destroy you, socially and financially. Understood. George paled. He muttered something about hospitality, grabbed his hat and left in a hurry. When the door closed, Eleanor collapsed into the nearest chair. He knows. Not everything. Only suspicions. But George will spread rumors. Even without proof, insinuation is enough in society. William knelt before her, taking her hands. Eleanor, listen to me. It doesn't matter what George says or does. Our marriage is real. Our commitment is real. Nothing can change that. But what if he questions its validity? What if he takes it to court? He has no legal grounds. You knew my identity before we married. We have witnesses. There was no coercion. Eleanor took a deep breath, trying to calm her panic. Why is he doing this? Greed. Desperation. George is deeply in debt. If he can destabilize our marriage, he inherits everything. We won't let that happen. No, we will not. But the night was long. Eleanor couldn't sleep, her mind racing with terrible possibilities. What if George convinced society she was a victim? What if they forced an annulment for her own good? Finally, near dawn, she went to William's study. He was awake too, papers spread across his desk. I can't sleep, she admitted. Neither can I, but Eleanor, I found something. He showed her documents. George is in more debt than I thought. He owes dangerous moneylenders. He's desperate. What do we do? William pulled her onto his lap, holding her tightly. We fight, together, as we always should have. Eleanor nestled against him. I'm scared. So am I, but fear will not defeat us. They stayed like that until the sun came up, two against the world. And when morning came, they had a plan. They would confront the rumors directly. They would be honest with their close circle of trusted friends. And they would protect what they had built. Because what they had, difficult, honest, imperfect, was too precious to lose. The resolution with George came faster than they expected. Stevens, ever loyal, discovered the full extent of the cousins' debts. The moneylenders were already looking for George. Debtor's prison was a real possibility. William offered a deal. He would pay the debts if George signed a document, renouncing any future claim to the Hartwell estate, and swore to remain silent about the rumors. The alternative was debtor's prison. George, cornered, accepted. He left Greystone shamed, furious, but silenced. It's over, William said that night. Eleanor, however, still felt the tremors of the near loss. It could have destroyed everything, but it didn't. Why? Because what we've built is strong. Cracked at the foundation, yes, but the repairs are solid. Eleanor hugged him. I don't want to live in fear anymore. Then we won't. December arrived with snow, their first Christmas together at Greystone. Catherine came for a visit, radiant, chattering incessantly about everything. Eleanor, you seem so different, Catherine exclaimed. More alive. I am different, Eleanor agreed. And it was true. On Christmas night, after an elaborate dinner and the exchange of gifts, William took Eleanor to his private study. I have something for you. It was a portrait, small, delicately painted. Margaret, young and smiling, with a baby in her arms. It's Margaret and Rose, William explained, painted from memory. I want you to know them, not as threats, but as a part of who I am. Eleanor held the portrait carefully. She was beautiful. She was. And you? You are too. Different, but equally beautiful. Equally strong. I'm not replacing her? No, you're not replacing anyone. You are. You are a new story. The first page of a second book. Eleanor smiled, tears in her eyes. A good simile. For a man who claims not to understand romanticism, I learned from a wise woman. She placed the portrait on the bookshelf where it would be visible. She belongs here. Part of the story. Our story. Years passed. The spring of 1825. Eleanor, now 30, was in the gardens of Greystone with 3 children running around her. Rose Margaret, 7 years old, with her mother's dark hair and her father's grey eyes. Edward William, 5, all energy and curiosity. Anne Catherine, 2, still wobbly but determined. William approached, his hair beginning to grey at the temples, but his eyes as intense as ever. A beautiful family, he said, hugging Eleanor from behind. Our family, she corrected, leaning back into him. Do you know what day it is today? I do. 8 years since the Duke of Greystone disguised himself as a footman. The worst decision I ever made. Eleanor turned in his arms. And the best. How so? Because it showed me who you were without a mask. And when the mask fell, I saw the flaws too. The fears. The humanity. She touched his face gently. I didn't fall in love with the perfect Duke. I fell in love with the imperfect man who was trying to be better. William kissed her deeply, not caring that the children were shouting, "Ew!" around them. Edward, Eleanor called when they parted. Come here. Rose Margaret stopped, confused. Mother, you called Father Edward? Sometimes I do. It's our private joke. Grown-ups have strange jokes, Edward William declared with the wisdom of a 5-year-old. William laughed, scooping his son into his arms. One day we'll explain. When you're old enough. For what? Asked Rose Margaret, ever curious. To understand that true love isn't born from perfection. It's born from honesty, from forgiveness, from choosing each other every single day, even when it's hard. Eleanor watched her family, the husband who began as a lie and became her truth, the children who had overcome her fears of childbirth, the home they had built brick by brick. It hadn't been easy. Some days still hurt. The scars of the initial betrayal still surfaced in moments of stress. But they had tools now: communication, honesty, commitment. Happy? William asked quietly. Immensely, Eleanor replied. Not in spite of our difficult story. Because of it. Because we survived the worst and built the best. The sun was setting over Greystone Manor, tinting everything gold. Children ran laughing. Servants prepared dinner. Life went on in its ordinary, extraordinary rhythm. And at the center of it all, 2 scarred hearts that had learned to beat in sync. Do you know what Margaret would tell me? William said thoughtfully. What? That I'm honoring her memory by living fully, by loving again. She would never have wanted me to be trapped in the past. She was wise. Like you. Eleanor smiled. We were wise together. We learned. They walked into the house hand in hand, their family following behind in organized chaos. Dinner awaited them. Bedtime stories would be read, the comforting routines of daily life. But that night, after the children were asleep, William and Eleanor stood in the library, the place where Edward and Lady Eleanor had first talked about poetry. Thank you, William said. For what? For forgiving, for trying, for building this with me. Thank you for deserving forgiveness, for being the man you promised you would be. They kissed in the soft candlelight, 2 people who had learned that cracked foundations, when repaired with honesty and love, become the strongest of all. Outside, the spring air was fragrant. Roses were blooming, new roses, but also memories of the rose who never bloomed, past and present intertwined, pain and joy coexisting, truth built upon a lie, and love, difficult, honest, precious, enduring, flourishing against all odds. It was an imperfect story, but it was theirs. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.